We're going to have to deal with this slide here. Now, I have been, and actually there's a friend of mine here from a long time ago, his name's Nick, and he knows me from a long time before. I've always been into fitness. I've always been into staying well, and for at least 20 years I've been telling people to drink bottled water. Now, can anyone here tell me what one of the most popular brands is known as Evian? Can anybody tell me what Evian spelled backwards is? Naive. Naive. I'm here to tell you, my friends, that to drink tap water in this day and age and to drink bottled water in this day and age is somewhat naive. A company called Coca-Cola invented something called smart water recently. I say that we live in a world of opposites. It is dumb water. Don't drink Coca-Cola's smart water. And I'll give you a little bit of information as to why. Now, I'm talking on distilled water, and most people think that distilled water is kind of just for car batteries and for irons and for that kind of equipment. Well, I tell you, the reason why it's good for irons and so on is because it's got no dirt in it. It's actually pure water. That is another word for distilled water, pure water. And I wonder if anyone here could give me some examples of pure water that we find in our day-to-day life. Pure or distilled water? No?
Rainwater.
Rainwater, very good. Rainwater is pure water. Mountain water, well, it depends on how far down the mountain you catch that water. But as it comes from the sky, it is perfectly pure, perfectly distilled water. Fruit, the water in fruit, and the water in vegetables is also distilled water. You can also get distilled water, almost distilled water, by reverse osmosis, so where it goes through filters and stones and rubble and eventually it comes out so almost perfectly pure. But the water we drink today typically is carrying about 300 parts per million of inorganic material. Now, we're sold this idea in our press that it's the minerals that are in our water are good for us. But there is an important distinction to be made between an organic mineral and an inorganic mineral. An organic mineral is one that comes in the food that you eat. So when you look at your diet plan or whatever, it'll say magnesium, it'll say calcium, it'll say all these sorts of things, but they should come from your avocados and from your watermelon and all these sort of things. They shouldn't be coming from the rubble or the stones or the inorganic material that is typically found in our water. So once you start to distill the water, you see how much, and I brought my home distiller here, you start to see how much sludge is actually inside of that, inside of your tap water and inside of your bottled water. And this inorganic material is actually very difficult for the body to digest and to process. And it starts to form arthritis in the joints, the dirt that's in your water. It starts to form macular degeneration behind the lens of your eye, and it's actually causing Alzheimer's conditions and other brain stem related conditions. So about 2 years ago, I came across this information, and quite quickly I switched my family to drinking only distilled water. And my teenage daughter's skin improved. My cat, my 17-year-old cat, her heavy hanging stomach has shrunk and gone away. She looks healthier now than she has in many years. I thought 2 years ago that she was on her last legs. Now she's got many legs still to come. It would seem. So in a nutshell, I'm saying that, well, what the research is that when you distill your water, firstly you extract all the dirt out of it, but you actually create a light negative charge in that water. So when you drink distilled water, it starts to go back in and suck out the dirt from your body. Another way of thinking about this is that if you had to only put distilled water in your dirty kettle for about 6 months, it would leach all of that calcite and all the build-up on your kettle. It would suck all of that back off the kettle. So it's doing the same thing in your body as well. And this is obviously what's happening with my cat. And for myself, I started wearing glasses 5 years ago. I don't need to wear them, although when my eyes are tired, with the small writing on my phone, I sometimes use them now. But I had been wearing glasses for 5 years, and I don't really use them at all anymore. So my eyesight has definitely improved. What else can I tell you about? I had my slides sort of giving me a way through this, but So I want to make sure that you realize that the minerals that are in your expensive water are actually inorganic minerals, not organic minerals. You need to feed inorganic minerals to your plants, allow your plants to turn those into organic minerals of the same name, magnesium and so on, and then you eat them. You don't need to take them through your water supply. So I've looked into filters and so on, and carbon filters get 20, 30, 40% of the dirt out of the water. But they can't get some of the smallest things, and some of the chlorines and these things that are really hard on the body. And one more important thing is that a lot of these Alzheimer conditions, brainstem conditions, are caused by heavy metals like lead, mercury, and other things that have found their way into our water supply over the years. Once you start distilling your water, your body this will help pull the stuff back out of your body. So the government advice is don't drink distilled water because it will leach the mineral from your body. I'm saying to you, go and look at this for yourself, go and research this, because the leaching that is happening is only the inorganic stuff. The organic minerals will be, of your bones and so on, will be absolutely untouched. Why? Because they also have a negative charge. So it's only the positive free radicals, the dirty stuff, the unhealthy stuff, the inorganic stuff really, that is going to be pulled out of your body. Even pathogens are said to be pulled out of your body by this distilled water. So I'm not plugging for any one distiller, but you can buy yourself a countertop distiller for about 150 to 250 pounds. It takes about 45 minutes to distill 1 liter of water. So I run my distiller for about 6 hours a day to provide me with enough water for my family. This is drinking water and cooking water for the animals and the humans. Once you are onto the distilled water, then you go back to drinking tap water and it feels heavy, it feels thick in your mouth, you can taste the kind of particulate and matter that's in there. So if you want any more information, please come and see me afterwards. But I will take a few questions before I finish up on this topic. Has anyone got any distilled water related questions? Marilyn?
Once it's distilled, can you put it in the electric kettle?
Yes. Oh yeah. No, I would only use it. I would prefer only to use distilled water in the kettle. But when you distill your water, it's got to go through the whole cooling cycle as well. For it to taste nice again, it really needs to be cooled down. So I tend to cool mine down in the fridge or under the moonlight overnight or whatever, and then it's ready to drink the next day. When you're into distilling if you start looking into water itself and how the properties of water are far more complex than what we've been taught in our biology class, you realize that putting it in the sunlight is very good for the water. However, once you do that, you start to introduce the chance of algae and so on building up. So you sometimes need to rinse your jug out with some hydrogen peroxide, that kind of thing, just to keep the balance right. You can look more into the alkalinity of your water and so on, but in the main, if you're distilling your water, then you don't need to do anything more. There are people who will argue that you should add minerals to your water in the same way that they've done with smart water. I would say you should be getting your minerals from your diet. You will never see, if you look at a diet plan, you will never see them say, eat 1 avo and a liter of water with this amount of dirt in it. And it depends on where you go. Here, my water is 280 parts per million. I have a little electronic meter, I can read it. 280 parts per million out of the tap, 320 parts per million out of the Evian. And if you go to Madrid, it's 50 parts per million. It depends on where you go. The World Health Organization says that anything under 300 parts is fine, but they won't talk about that those 300 parts actually equate to about 400 grams of dirt, sludge, at the tiny level that your body has to deal with. You see, in nature, when rain falls onto the mountaintop, the water cools, it falls onto the mountaintop and runs down the stream, and the little bits of material that it picks up are actually much bigger. They come from the river. They're much bigger than the tiny, tiny bits of chemicals and the tiny, tiny bits of dirt that have found their way into our water supply now. So look into it. Look into my distiller. I brought it over here. Go and have a look inside of it. Just have a little smell. That's what the dirt is in your water that's coming out. I wash it out every few days, but it's foul what's coming out of there. If my distiller breaks down, the family are, we need fresh water straight away, otherwise we're not drinking. Are there any other questions? Yes.
Does the distilling abstract hormones from the water?
Yes. Absolutely everything. So the word, just so you know that the word still, like if something is stillborn, it's dead, right? So still water is dead water. And the more mud it has in it, the stiller it becomes. So distill actually gives it back its glassiness. It becomes slippery. The water becomes slippery because it is, in other words, pure. It has, mine comes out of my distiller with 1 or 2 parts per million. So it's almost 100% pure. But that's what I would measure. What you would measure now would be a 1 or 2 parts per million in that water. And everything, every bit of man-made or non-natural stuff, everything is taken out of the water. It's as pure as what comes out of your fruit.
You just mentioned the word dead water.
Yes.
What is dead? The still water.
Yeah. So I don't want to go too deeply into like how I see water, but for me now, water is almost like an electrical, and it has. So the reason why we have to oxygenate a fish tank is because without that, those fish would die. The reason is because that water needs to be kept alive because let's say air, that is being pumped into that water, right? And the same is true with your bottle of water. If you leave it to stagnate over a period of time, that water is going to become increasingly still and increasingly less lively. So if you take your glass of water that you've left overnight by the bedside, it tastes a bit stale the next morning. But if you freshen it up by pouring it into another glass and doing that 2 or 3 times to reinvigorate it with oxygen, then yes, you will kind of start to bring more life back into that water. So the whole process of pouring, allowing the air to sort of circulate with the water, that whole process is giving life to that water. And just like the fish needs oxygenated, well alive water, so too does the human. And I think that you'd find that your fish tank would do a lot better with pure water. As I said, your animals will do an awful lot better on pure water. Yeah. Any other questions?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So I looked quickly at your distiller, and I'm just thinking, if it does what you say it does, and I'm sure it does, then possibly it could eradicate the water issue globally. So for children that are drinking dirty water and are then subject to cholera and typhoid, would a machine like that be the answer?
Yes. It takes all the pathogens. It clears all the pathogens out of the water. It leaves it in a perfectly good and perfectly healthy condition. The only debate between people is whether you should be adding salts back into the water, some salts back in. And I won't go too far down that. I say, again, your diet should provide you with all the minerals you need. But I wouldn't argue against someone putting a little bit of extra salt back into their water. It's up to them. It's a personal choice. But all the research I've done has suggested is that it doesn't really matter. Really, your food is where you get all of these nutrients and micronutrients from. But absolutely, it will clear. It would take. I would take the dirtiest water and pour it into there and be happy that all that's going to come back is the steam. Now, initially, you burn off like what's called volatile organic compounds. They get caught up in a carbon filter that's right at the top of that. But everything else is going to stay back. All the heavy stuff will stay back inside, and nothing will come through. You can take my little electronic probe, and you'll see it's gone from 280 parts to 2 parts per million. And I put aside I used to put aside a cup of this sludge, and then I dried it out. And if I had to have brought that powder here, I probably could have been done for dealing with some kind of chemical, some sort of toxic stuff. You probably all would have needed to wear like hazardous gear in order to handle this stuff. But you're actually drinking it. I can smell the chlorine in the water now, and I know that these things are not good for us either. Let alone the people who are starving for good water. Yeah.
There's quite a lot of these machines on the market, as you know, and some of them range from about £54.
Yeah.
£1,100 or so. But I've noticed that a lot of serious people spend quite a lot of money on one like at least £150. Is there a difference between these really cheaper things and...
I would say not really, because in essence, all you're doing is you're creating steam, and it's about pulling that steam off that's all that the process is. I mean, that's what the sun does every day. It sits over the ocean and pulls up that water and cools it down, and then it comes down as perfectly pure rain. Well, that's all we're trying to recreate here. There are ones that have like plastic catching containers, and I'd say try and avoid that. Go with glass if you can, but that saves you a bit of money. I really can't say. I mean, because mine runs 2 or 3 cycles every day. This is my second one in 2 years. So, I think they do. The fan and all that thing can kind of get tired quicker, I suppose. People who've got a lot of money to spend can have one built in. If you've got $1 or $2 to spend, you can have it all built in. You don't have to fuss with all of it.
I've heard some reviews that the cheaper ones tend to blow up in the so
Right.
catch fire, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it's worth spending the money.
Well, this company that I've got mine from is a British company. It's very similar to the others on the market.
One more question though.
Yeah.
Structured water.
Yeah.
When this distilling process really takes the whole structure out of the water, and most of it's crap anyway, as we know. But there's a lot being talked about with regard to structured water and how it's really good for the blood. It's been used on people with sickle cell, and within 20 minutes their blood sort of stops clotting and they're no longer sickle cell. So there's all that sort of stuff going about. What do you think about the structure?
I think that if you look at the process of water, of how it goes in nature, then there's a lot of sound and what's the word? Turbine, or turning of the water as it comes down the river. If you look at Schellberger's work is really telling on that, and how important he discovered that water needs to come below 5 degrees centigrade. But it's also about how these vortices are happening and bringing more energy and more life into that. And yes, if it's traveling over certain kinds of stones, is it imparting more structure and more value to that? Yes. We know from a doctor called Dr. Emoto, that you can speak to the water and then freeze it. And the way that you treated that water, once you freeze it, you'll be able to tell which water you were nasty with and which water you were nice with. Yeah. So we know. Yeah. So this water that I brought tonight, I did bless this water. I said, I hope that everybody who drinks it is healthy, and so I did impart some love onto this water, for what it's worth. And it's been out in the sunlight, because again that's an important part of the natural cycle. People recommend going for blue glass over white glass. These are things that you can do. I didn't want to go too deeply just for this evening to go too deeply into the nuances about water and the life that's in water and so on. I just want people to know that there's an awful lot to water. We are 70-odd% water. You are what you drink. You are what you eat, and all that sort of thing. So if you're drinking clean, you're putting, people spend more money on the oil for their car engine than they bother about the oil for their body, right? So I'm asking you to look into this. There are, as you suggested, there are deeper aspects or to this subject of water. But from a starting point, look into distilling your own water. Honestly, the box on my first distiller, it said scientifically proven to help with Alzheimer's condition. So they're willing to start putting, the medical fraternity is not allowed to talk about curing people too much. It's not really in the industry of curing, the business of curing people. But this can certainly allay the onset of Alzheimer's, but I think it might even cure the onset of Alzheimer's, particularly if you can get a hold of those heavy metals and pull them back out of your body before it's too late. My mother died of a condition called motor neuron disease, which is what started me on a journey of looking for the truth about why there was no cures for these kinds of things. And I now think that had I known what I know now, my mother's journey with that illness would have been completely different. But people talk about curing a lot of conditions with structured water and just distilling water. So, any other questions? Otherwise, I'll wrap up. Next,
a practical question.
Yeah.
Actually. I totally understand the health benefits of drinking distilled water. I've been a big fan of, distilled water. I never actually tried it till tonight. I know that drinking bottled water is not going to be great for the environment, or particularly good for me. Tap water is definitely out of the question.
Yeah.
So I do get the health benefits, but when you talk about leaving an electrical appliance on for 4 to 6 hours, it's kind of going to raise my blood pressure, the amount of money it's going to cost me.
Yes.
That is, we pay a huge amount of money living in London for our bill.
Yes.
And I'm just having a smart meter fitted recently. Is that guy going to be in the red all day?
Yeah. The question that Nick asked here is a practical one about the cost of generating your own distilled water. A friend of mine uses a reverse osmosis filter that costs him nothing. He does catch rainwater to start with, so he starts with very clean water, and he ends up with very clean water. So there are cheaper ways of getting to this without having to run this. This is like running 3 kettles, because it's a 750 watt element, and you're running it for 3 hours to get 4 liters. So it is an expense on that. I would say to someone who was buying bottles of water at £1 a day or £1.50 a day, whatever, then you're probably not going to be spending any more money by drinking distilled water. But I think ultimately, this is the Nick raises a very, for me, and a very important reason why I'm here, is because we live in a world in which it's actually more expensive to try and keep yourself healthy. In some ways, you know. So obviously, if we all lived up in the mountains and we had a fresh stream with water coming from the hills and that, and we'd be, you know, you don't need to bother with that. But honestly, you've got 300 parts per million in your water here, which is a lot of dirt, and it's going to cause. We're seeing cancers in animals now. We're seeing cancers in children of the water that we've never seen before. And I suggest to you that a lot of this is coming from the shit. The dirt that's in your water. So there is almost, it's an awful dichotomy to be in, that we're having to kind of make a judgment call. But if this is going to extend your life by 10 and 20%, if this is going to allay or prevent you from getting some of those killer diseases that we see so much of in this day and age, then there's almost like no cost.
Cheers.
I'm going to hand over to my friend Cosmic Cat for.
I've got a little ditty I wrote for this evening. Thanks, Dad. Mankind's going to hell and it's happening in plain sight. Let's take back our power and focus on kindness. We can change with unified might. The greedy overlords that are running the show don't have our best interests at heart. Unless we step up and do what is right, this beautiful world falls apart. Ancient wisdoms are hidden, inner guidance is askew, and distractions are every which way. We need to dig deep and find inner peace. Only then can we begin a new day. To our true way of being, living from the heart, divine feminine to balance things out. The separation agenda that keeps our hearts shrunk, when love could return with such clout. So much pain and loneliness, everyone's on a screen. As conscious natural beings, our perceptions can be redeemed. We're all in this together, and united we can stand. How did we slip into this mindless mire, letting tricksters get the upper hand? I can't rest while children are dying and Mother Nature being destroyed. Wake up to the facts while minds are hijacked, and let common sense be deployed. It's an overwhelming challenge, but we can't lay down and die. By lifting our spirits on an individual level, we have plenty of reasons to try. For our future generations, we can step up to the plate, be guided by our inner wisdom, our source that's so innate. Be mindful of this consciousness war and focus on what feels good, bringing back harmony, honouring life and living the way we should. We are amazing, loving beings, sick and tired of negativity and fear. If we rise up and do what's intrinsically right, the time for real change is here. I'm just a curious geocentric girl, vibing in an electromagnetical world, with determination for uncovering lies and discovering wisdoms that have been withheld. So as more souls wake up to truth and together shine a light on the dark, we'll raise the frequency of this realm and hit the ball out of the park.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to hand you over Crowhurst. I found her on Facebook Live a couple of years ago. Very courageous
It's doing
and
buffering. I don't know
determined.
what that means. That's a shame.
And here she is.
Hello.
That's my normal.
Shame about the.
Hello people, how are we? I would have had this printed out, but I put it on my screen, so bear with me. Okay.
You might be getting audio.
Anyone here seen the film The Matrix?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. When you get on this truth-seeking mission, you'll understand movies depict a lot of truth, and The Matrix depicts a lot of truth. I want to tell you a bit about Morpheus when he's explaining to Neo what the Matrix is. And the Matrix is a system. That system is our enemy. But when you're in the system, what do you see? You see doctors, teachers, lawyers, politicians. These are the very people, their minds we're trying to free.
Yeah, sorry about
And
that. I might have to
until we
restart
free
this.
those minds, those people are our enemy.